So let me ask you a question. What are you if you only use 50% of your resources? You are half as good as you could be. And when women are excluded from any realm of society, then that realm is half as good as it could be. Sport is an example of such a realm. Tonight, I would like to tell you about the journey that women have been on and are still on, opening closed doors to women in sport. Since the inception of modern sport, women have been shut out. And although we have come a long way since my heyday in the 70s and the 80s, we still have quite a ways to go, particularly when it comes to women in leadership positions and women employed in the world of sport. So to understand this journey, we have to understand a little bit about the past. And modern organized sport has its origins in the Victorian era. This was a time when Darwin and the theory of evolution were popular, and it was a commonly held belief that men continued to evolve and women had stopped evolving some time ago. Therefore, women were inferior. Women were considered delicate, frail, and too weak to participate in rigorous sports. So women were relegated to what were called the pretty sports, such as fencing, archery, or figure skating. Women could also participate in the ladylike country club sports of golf, tennis, or croquet. In addition, with women overstrained, it was believed that they would damage their reproductive organs. And so women were to be chaste, and they had to wear heavy, cumbersome layers of clothing because it was verboten to show any skin. Sometimes women played tennis or other sports in costumes that weighed as much as 35 pounds. When I started fencing in the mid-60s, these Victorian ideals were still well entrenched in sport. Women were restricted to participate in the less rigorous sports, and rules were modified to prevent overstraining. So, for example, in my sport, fencing, women could fence in foil, and foil is a point weapon. It's based on the teaching sword, and the target area is the torso. But men could fence in foil or épée, which is a weapon based on the dueling sword. It is also a point weapon, and the target area is from the head to the toe. And men could also choose to participate in saber. And saber is a cutting weapon. It's based on the cavalry sword, and the target area is from the waist up. Men had the choice of 3 weapons, and they could fence, or they fenced to 5 points. Women could only fence in foil, and they fenced to 4 points. In the 60s, women's basketball was played on half court. But in 1962, they did pass a rule allowing women to snatch the ball from their opponents. Okay. Sometimes women have had to go to extremes in order to gain access to the playing field. And Catherine Switzer is a great example. In 1967, she entered the Boston Marathon as K.V. Switzer, so no one would know that she was a female entrant. A couple of miles into the race, the media bus discovered her, and they started to dog her, heckle her, and ridicule her. And a race official literally physically assaulted her, trying to drag her off the course. She got away, persevered, finished the race, and opened another door for women in sports. 2 years later, women were accepted into the Boston Marathon. In my high school, there were no sports for girls. So my parents enrolled me in a community fencing program. And my first coach recognized my athletic potential. He encouraged me to stay in fencing and to compete nationally. And at age 15, I made my first junior world team. My mother, in an effort to get me some cross training, approached the boys' high school track and field coach and asked him if I could train with the boys. He reluctantly agreed on the condition that we told no one because he would be at risk of losing his job for coaching a girl. I showed up to practice. He handed me a written workout and then proceeded to ignore me. He didn't recognize any potential I had. This, in light of the fact that Wilma Rudolph had just become the fastest woman in the world, bringing home 3 gold medals from the 1960 Olympics, and she's the first woman to bring home 3 gold medals. But I didn't know about Wilma, and I didn't know about Catherine Switzer. I just knew I was discouraged. So I dropped out of high school. I continued training in my fencing. I waited the requisite period. I took my GED and went back to school to a community college. Yeah. A community college that helped me get back on my academic feet just in the nick of time for the passage of Title IX and an opportunity to go to school on an athletic scholarship in California. Title IX is an equal opportunity law that pertains to educational institutions and their programs, and that includes sports. And it had the effect of forcing schools to offer sports to girls and colleges and universities to offer scholarships to women. So by the time I made it to college in the 70s, this was the era when Billie Jean King slammed Bobby Riggs in 3 straight sets in the famous Battle of the Sexes. Women's basketball was finally allowed to play full court and was added to the 1976 Olympics. And in fencing, they finally allowed the women to fence the same amount of points as men, 5 points. However, we were still restricted to the 1 weapon. By the time I made the 1984 Olympic team, women's field hockey, shooting, and cycling were added to the Olympics, and Joan Benoit came home with the first Olympic gold medal in women's marathon. In the late 1990s and the early 2000s, it was women like Jackie Joyner-Kersee, 4-time Olympian, won 6 Olympic gold medals, and was named Athlete of the Century by Sports Illustrated. And women like Mia Hamm, who led the U.S. women's soccer team to 2 gold medals in '96 and the 2004 Olympics. These women and others like them were leading the way to burst open the doors for women to participate in sports. In 1996, women's épée was finally added to the Olympics, and in 2004, women's saber was added to the Olympics. And it was a U.S. woman fencer, Mariel Zagunas, who brought home the gold medal. And it was the first gold medal for American fencing in over 100 years. Today, we see incredible athletes like Serena Williams, who's been ranked #1 in the world 8 times, still subject to Victorian ideals on the tennis court. Women's tennis rules are less rigorous than men's. Women play the best 2 out of 3 sets, while men play the best 3 out of 5. Women's dress and behavior on the tennis court is more closely policed and harshly judged than men's. And naturally, male professional tennis players make significantly more money than female professional tennis players. So Title IX opened the floodgates for women to participate in sports, but we still have a ways to go. And in fact, we are facing a wall akin to the wall of China when it comes to women in leadership positions, coaching, and employment in sport industry. In 1972, when Title IX passed, 90% of all intercollegiate women's teams were coached by women. In 1981, that was down to 55%. And the most recent measurement in 2017, we're down to 40%. In a recent research report put out by the University of Minnesota, 86 educational institutions with major sporting programs were graded based on the percent of women head coaches coaching women's teams. All of the major conferences received a C or below. And only 2 individual institutions received an A, and that was Cincinnati and the University of Central Florida. The percent of women coaching fencing is 26%. In soccer, it's 27%. That's a D. In track and field, it's 12%. That's an F. It's not all dismal news, though. Women's field hockey, lacrosse, and softball are at above 70%, and women's basketball just topped 60%. The Olympic movement numbers are no better. In another research report put out by the University of Central Florida, the International Olympic Committee received a D+ for the percent of women in leadership roles in international Olympic sport. The lead author of this report, Richard Lapchick, called the leadership of international sport an exclusive club of men. So these attitudes towards women persist in spite of the fact that these antiquated Victorian ideals don't hold water and are not based on any kind of evolutionary science. Women's performances and accomplishments have shattered those misconceptions. Yet, that wall remains, and the men in charge appear to be hanging on to control with everything they have. So, what must we do to overcome this encrusted bias? First, we all have to realize that when women are empowered, society is better. When women are allowed to reach their full potential, poverty rates are reduced, economies are better. Sexual assault and gender-based violence is also reduced, as can be evidenced in the numerous sex scandals in all male sports. Next, institutions with sporting programs, sport organizations, and the sport industry must re-examine their values and implement hiring practices that yield not the good old boy, but the best candidate instead. And because old, encrusted ideas die hard, California just passed a law requiring all California corporations to have women on their boards. The U.S. Congress is considering legislation requiring all financial institutions to publish the diversity on their boards. And the sports world must follow the legislative model and implement statutes that require parity, because diversity does not happen naturally. We have to make it happen. And women, you must continue to pursue your dreams and your ambitions and to demand the right to participate, to govern, and to have equal employment in sport industry. Currently, there are women leading the way that we can look to for inspiration. Anita de France, 1976 bronze medalist, is now serving her second term as the Vice President of the International Olympic Committee. And there's Pat Summitt, who is the winningest all-time NCAA Division I basketball coach ever, male or female. And then we can look to Hannah Storm and Andrea Krimmer, who are the first all-female NFL broadcast team. You know, it's astonishing when you think about it. It's taken over 100 years for women just to gain access to the playing field. Before another century passes, sports world, open the door, tear down that wall, and start operating using 100% of your resources. It just makes sense. Thank you.